You've spent years fighting with yourself, trying to be perfect, punishing yourself for every small mistake. But Buddhist monks have known for 2,500 years that this internal war was never meant to be won. When you understand that making peace with yourself doesn't mean accepting your flaws, but rather stopping seeing them as flaws, your entire relationship with yourself changes. What you called weakness was actually your humanity asking to be embraced. Today, you'll discover the most powerful Buddhist teachings to finally stop this battle you should never have started. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you're watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why it's sometimes so hard to feel at peace with yourself, even when everything around you is quiet and calm? It's as if, deep inside, there's a conversation that never seems to stop, a running list of worries, doubts, and old memories poking up, making it hard to just feel settled. It turns out that this buzzing inner noise has been with humans for as long as we can remember. Even centuries ago, people living completely different lives from us noticed the same thing, feeling torn inside, longing for calm while being pulled by all these conflicting thoughts and feelings they couldn't always control. That's one of the reasons Buddhist teachings feel so real and useful when we want to rest our minds and make peace with ourselves. They start by looking right at this problem, examining where inner conflict actually comes from and why it stubbornly sticks around even if everything in our life looks fine on the surface. If you've ever lain awake at night thinking about what you should have done differently in your day, or if you sometimes feel like you're judging yourself for not being good enough, you're definitely not alone. Buddhism has a name for this type of struggle. It's called dukkha. Not quite pain, not quite worry, but more like a sense that something isn't right or complete inside. Long before any modern psychologist wrote about anxiety or perfectionism, Buddhist monks were quietly sitting under trees, looking closely at their own minds to see why this kind of restlessness appears. What they noticed is that a lot of our inner conflict comes from the way we react to our own minds. We often don't just experience a thought and let it go. Instead, we latch on, thinking about it over and over, arguing with ourselves, or wishing things had turned out differently. That's where so much of our discomfort begins. It helps to know that much of this conflict isn't really our fault. As children, we're shaped by the people and situations around us. Maybe someone said we ought to behave a certain way or become a certain kind of person in order to be loved, safe, or valued. Slowly, these rules and expectations sink deep into us, and we carry them without even noticing it. It's almost like a script running inside, telling us, again and again, I should be better, or I'm not enough unless I do everything perfectly. Buddhist teachers remind us that these phrases often have nothing to do with our true worth or reality. They're just the echo of old lessons we picked up, often without choosing to. There's a second force at work too, our own stubborn desire to be perfect. Sometimes, without realizing it, we end up creating standards that no real person could ever live up to. Social media and movies can make this even worse because everywhere we look, people seem happier, more successful, and more beautiful than we feel on the inside. The more we search for the right way to be, the more we focus on everything we believe we're missing. Buddhist wisdom says that this desperate clinging to perfection actually pushes peace further away. When we believe we need to be flawless, we start battling parts of ourselves that are simply normal and human, our mistakes, our tiredness, our little insecurities. This habit of fighting against our own humanity sets off what feels like a civil war inside. We tell ourselves that we shouldn't feel certain things, or that good people aren't supposed to have negative thoughts or make errors. When we push parts of ourselves away, we create separation inside, as if our whole self isn't welcome. Buddhism calls this suffering, not because there's something wrong with us, but because we're battling ourselves using unrealistic weapons: criticism, shame, guilt, and endless comparison. The inner peace we long for slips further away, replaced with tightness in the chest and that nagging feeling that something is wrong. Buddhist teachings offer a gentle way out of this struggle. They suggest that instead of endlessly criticizing ourselves or trying to fix every subtle feeling, we can start by becoming aware, just noticing what's really happening in our minds. This step sounds simple, but it's actually pretty powerful. When you take a breath and quietly observe, right now I'm judging myself, or I'm feeling anxious about that mistake at work, you're already creating a little space between who you are and the storm of thoughts spinning inside you. You're no longer completely lost in the story. Instead, you're seeing the story for what it really is. Just a story, one of many that your mind tends to tell. Sometimes Buddhist wisdom calls this taking the seat of the witness. Instead of being dragged around by every passing thought, you sit back, just watching. You notice, oh, here's my mind worrying about the future, or there's that voice telling me I'm not good enough again. This is the opposite of running away from your feelings, and it's also not about controlling your mind or pretending to be positive all the time. It's about honestly seeing what's happening without trying to chase anything away or make it different. This kind of awareness is called mindfulness in Buddhism, and it's considered the very first step in making peace inside. One of the reasons this works is because thoughts are slippery. They come and go so quickly, and if you try to smash them down or force them to stop, you end up giving them even more power. When you notice a self-judging thought without reacting or resisting, you rob it of the fuel it needs to keep spinning. In time, it's possible to see that none of these judgments or worries are permanent. They aren't the truth about who you are. They're simply habits your mind has learned. Buddhist teachers say that when we truly get this, when we see that the inner stories are not reality, we start to loosen the grip of self-judgment, even if only a little at first. Of course, nobody can see every old pattern overnight. Sometimes a wave of self-criticism or worry will sweep in before you even know it. That's normal. What matters is practicing this curious, non-judgmental noticing over and over until it gradually becomes your default way of meeting your mind. Each time you catch yourself slipping into old habits of harsh judgment, you can gently turn back to this practice saying, "Ah, there it is again. That's one of those old stories my mind likes to tell." In Buddhism, this is seen as an act of kindness, choosing to meet yourself not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a friend who deserves understanding. It helps to remember that you're not alone in this. Buddhist monks and practitioners from all walks of life continue to return to the same basic questions. Why does my mind do this? Why is it so hard to let go of certain thoughts, even when I know they make me miserable? The answer is simple and compassionate. It's just what minds do. In fact, Buddhist teachers sometimes say that just noticing the struggle, without making yourself wrong for having it, is a form of wisdom all by itself. This isn't about blame or looking for someone who caused your inner conflict. It's more about gently investigating, with real curiosity, where these feelings come from, what triggers them, what kinds of old stories or beliefs feed them. Over time, people who practice Buddhist awareness exercises notice patterns. Maybe criticism comes up every time you try something new. Maybe the urge to compare yourself with others pops up when you're feeling uncertain or tired. Once you spot the origins of these patterns, they start to lose their power. You begin to see, this isn't who I am. It's just a habit my mind has picked up, probably to protect me or keep me safe. Buddhism doesn't ask you to ignore the pain or pretend that nothing bothers you. Instead, the teaching is to acknowledge what's here now with honesty. If you're feeling anxious, bored, self-critical, or sad, you admit it, you name it, you look straight at it. Paradoxically, this honest recognition softens the harshness. Instead of giving yourself another layer of shame for having these feelings, you just notice them, like noticing the weather. Some days are stormy, some are sunny. But you remain the witness, steady and calm, rather than becoming identified with the storm. This gentle turning toward your own experience creates space for understanding to blossom. It's from this foundation that deeper peace can start to develop. If you're caught in a loop of thoughts, instead of whipping yourself for being too negative or not spiritual enough, you realize, this too is part of my experience. That realization is powerful because it says there is nothing fundamentally wrong with having conflict inside. There's only the natural result of being human, shaped by years of learning, habit, hope, and fear. As people keep practicing this honest, non-judgmental awareness, something else often begins to happen. They start to sense where their hardest judgments come from. Maybe it's an old voice, a teacher, a parent, a friend, or just a memory of how things should be. Maybe it's born from fear, trying to keep you safe by getting you to avoid mistakes. Once you see the roots, you can meet these parts of yourself with gentleness rather than anger. Buddhism invites us to respond with compassion, as if we are comforting a small child or a nervous pet, acknowledging that even self-criticism is just a confused way of wishing for safety or love. Sometimes this stage is uncomfortable because it brings up feelings we'd rather avoid. You might notice embarrassment, regret, or sadness. Buddhist teachings describe this as a natural part of waking up, noticing the ways our own mind fights itself and choosing to stay present anyway. When waves of discomfort arise, you can imagine offering them a seat at the table, just for a while. Okay, I see you, you might think. You're allowed to be here for now. In Buddhist monasteries, monks sometimes practice meditating with their most difficult emotions, not because they want to get rid of them, but because they know that resisting only makes the feelings more sticky and strong. Once you've started to notice where your inner conflict comes from, the old stories, the judgments, the craving to be perfect, you can begin to loosen the grip these forces have on your daily life. This isn't the same as making all your feelings disappear. Instead, it means trusting that you have the strength to sit with discomfort, to look closely at your experiences, and to be kinder to yourself than the world often is. Buddhism teaches that this basic friendliness toward yourself is the key first step toward making peace inside. Another reminder from Buddhist wisdom is that your mind's job is not to make you happy all the time. It's really good at imagining danger, pointing out what's missing, or replaying old moments in an attempt to keep you safe. If you can see these habits clearly, you can also see that they don't need to control your decisions or your mood every moment. You can say, "Thank you, mind, for trying to help," and then gently guide your attention back to what you actually want to focus on: a breath, a moment of quiet, or the feeling of the bed underneath you as you prepare to sleep. This type of patient self-inquiry doesn't require you to become a Buddhist or attend a retreat. It's something you can do anytime you notice yourself tied up in knots about something you said or did. As you practice, your mind gets used to turning away from harsh judgment and toward honest, gentle noticing. Over time, the old patterns might still show up, but you learn that you can let them pass by like clouds in the sky. Your identity isn't tied up in being anxious or critical. Instead, you're the one quietly watching, willing to learn and to understand. The key message from Buddhist teachings about the roots of inner conflict is this: much of the unrest we feel is the product of misunderstanding our own minds, over-identifying with thoughts and feelings, believing we have to smash down every imperfection, and forgetting that being human means carrying some confusion as part of the package. The simple revolutionary move is to stop fighting, to watch with curiosity, to befriend the worried or judging voice, to admit when comfort is far away, and to trust that peace grows from this honest seeing. A life spent running from inner conflict creates exhaustion, but a life spent looking gently at these struggles allows for rest, even if those old stories still whisper every now and then. The wisdom of Buddhism doesn't ask us to stop feeling or expecting too much from ourselves. Instead, it asks us to understand the roots of inner conflict, to see where they come from, and to question whether we really need to believe every critical thought the mind serves up. When we do, the world of the mind becomes a little softer, and the possibility of falling asleep peacefully, at last, becomes much more real. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, "If only I were perfect, I would finally feel happy and respected"? This thought has a way of sneaking into all kinds of moments, whether you just scrolled through your phone, listened to a friend talk about their achievements, or simply sat down to reflect on your own life. The feeling of wanting to be perfect and the pressure to always get things exactly right might sound like a small problem, but in reality, this goal of perfection has a surprisingly big impact on how we see ourselves and how we treat ourselves every day. When you look at this closely through the lens of Buddhist teachings, you start to see the real consequences of chasing perfection and why Buddhists insist that perfection is just an illusion, a trick of the mind that leads us away from acceptance and peace. The desire for perfection starts early. In families, children are often taught to strive for good grades, to behave well, and to make parents proud. At school, the message continues. If you're perfect, you're rewarded. If you slip up, you risk shame or disappointment. You grow older, and the world keeps reminding you of this idea. Social media and advertising constantly display images of flawless bodies, exciting vacations, and people who always seem happy and successful. Even workplaces often develop unspoken standards that only the smartest, the fastest, or the most polished are truly valued. It doesn't matter if you grew up in Brazil, China, or England, wherever people gather and compare themselves, the race for perfection exists. Buddhist teachings look very closely at this tendency. They point out that the root of so much suffering, or what Buddhist texts call dukkha, is the mind's habit of craving and comparing. When you crave perfection, you become attached to a certain image of yourself. Maybe it's being the best in school. Maybe it's having a certain amount of money at a certain age, or being the most attractive person in the room. No matter which image you chase, the result is usually the same: a never-ending cycle of disappointment, pressure, and self-doubt. You might achieve something that feels like perfection for a moment, but that satisfaction is usually brief. the mind immediately starts looking for something else that needs fixing, or it finds someone even more polished to compare yourself to. One of the most direct lessons from Buddhist tradition is the idea that perfection, in the way our minds imagine it, simply does not exist in real life. Everyone you see, no matter how confident or accomplished they seem, is still a human being with private struggles, doubts, and disappointments. Monks who have practiced mindfulness for decades admit that their minds still produce messy, unwanted thoughts. People who look strong and healthy on the outside sometimes carry old wounds or silent illnesses on the inside. So why does the mind keep pushing the idea that perfection is possible and even necessary? Buddhist wisdom says that it's the result of misunderstanding your own nature. Most of us learn somewhere along the way to judge ourselves according to outside standards, instead of becoming curious about our actual experience in the present moment. The consequences of chasing perfection are often subtle at first, but become more obvious the longer you look at them. For one thing, striving for perfection can make you continually dissatisfied with who you are right now. Instead of feeling grateful for what you have accomplished or loving your unique personality, you spend your days chasing an ever-moving target. Maybe you tell yourself that you'll finally relax or allow yourself to be proud once you lose those last 10 pounds, once you get the next job offer, or once your house looks as nice as your neighbour's. The goalposts keep moving, but the finish line never appears. This sense of always being almost there, but not quite, eats away at your confidence and joy. Another problem with perfectionism is that it keeps you focused on flaws, not growth. When you're obsessed with avoiding any possible slip-up, you miss out on the freedom to learn from mistakes or to enjoy the process of trial and error. Perfection makes you defensive and fearful. It can make you scared to try new things because failing doesn't feel like just part of life anymore. It feels like proof that you are not good enough. People who cling to perfection often talk about feeling tense or exhausted, like they can only show the acceptable parts of their personality and must hide everything else. This tension can even affect your relationships, making it hard to relax or to trust other people with your vulnerabilities. Buddhist teachings encourage a completely different approach. Rather than believing that you must meet some fixed standard to be worthy or whole, Buddhism says that you are complete right now, simply by being alive and conscious. Your worth is not measured by a grade, an award, or a number on a scale. Buddhist philosophy emphasizes that everything in life changes. All successes and failures come and go. So chasing perfection is like chasing smoke or trying to hold onto a cloud. You cannot ever be finished, complete, or flawless, because the idea of perfection is always changing in your mind, and in society too. A big part of this comes back to seeing how thoughts work. Your own mind will always find something more you need to change or improve. You might look at your face and suddenly notice a wrinkle that wasn't there before, or you see someone on the street with better clothes or more expensive shoes. Instantly, old thoughts appear. She is prettier, he is richer, maybe I should work harder, maybe I did something wrong. These are not facts, they are habits of mind. Buddhism says that noticing this habit, just calling it out when it happens, is the first step in escaping its negative effects. When you notice that your mind is comparing you to someone else, you can gently tell yourself, that's just a thought. It doesn't mean I'm less worthy. Sometimes people mistake this teaching for saying, you should never try to improve, or don't set any goals. That's not the message. Buddhist teachings do not encourage laziness or apathy. Rather, they encourage setting goals and learning new skills with a sense of play, openness, and acceptance. When you are not trapped by the need to be perfect, you can enjoy working towards something new, knowing that mistakes are a natural part of growth. Progress replaces pressure, and small improvements become reasons to celebrate, rather than evidence that you're still not enough. This way of thinking changes not only how you see yourself, but also how you treat other people. When you believe that perfection is possible and required, you may unconsciously expect it from friends, family, or colleagues too. This creates a lot of disappointment and frustration in relationships. Instead of appreciating people for their real qualities and accepting their flaws, you become anxious when they make mistakes or fail to meet your high standards. Relationships based on such unrealistic expectations quickly become stressful and cold. Buddhist wisdom highlights the importance of compassion, which means understanding that everyone struggles and that no one is perfect, not even close. Living with the illusion of perfection also limits your ability to be present. You may find yourself constantly replaying past mistakes in your mind, wishing you had handled things differently, or worrying about how to avoid mistakes in the future. This mental habit pulls you out of the current moment, making it difficult to appreciate simple pleasures or to notice the small, beautiful things around you. Buddhist meditation, which often involves simply noticing your breath or body sensations, helps anchor you in what is happening right now. In this space, you can begin to accept yourself as you are, not some future perfect version, but the living, breathing person you already are. People sometimes ask if letting go of perfection means giving up on dreams or standards entirely, but Buddhist teachings suggest that it is actually the opposite. When you stop punishing yourself for being imperfect, you free up your energy and creativity. You become willing to experiment, to play, and to risk mistakes because you know you are not defined by them. Many people notice that creativity and genuine productivity soar when the pressure to be perfect disappears. Instead of worrying about every detail, you get lost in doing what you love and often end up exceeding your own expectations. You might be wondering, if I let go of perfectionism, won't people judge me? Won't I get left behind? These are normal fears. Society still sends many signals that being perfect is the only way to get ahead. Yet look more closely at the people who are truly admired and respected, not just for their appearance or achievements, but for their honesty, kindness, and presence. More often than not, the people who inspire others are those who openly share their struggles and show up as themselves, regardless of whether everything is going smoothly. Buddhist teachings affirm that genuine connection happens when you put down the mask of perfection and invite others to do the same. Perfectionism also plays out in ways you might not immediately expect. Sometimes it leads to procrastination. The fear of not doing something perfectly can be so strong that you avoid doing it at all. Or you might notice that you finish tasks but never really feel proud of them because your brain keeps replaying tiny errors or missed opportunities. Over time, this steals your motivation and makes it harder to start new projects or have fun learning. Buddhist philosophy reminds us that this cycle doesn't have to continue. By noticing when perfectionist thinking appears and gently letting it go, you can reclaim the energy that perfectionism once drained from you. This isn't an overnight transformation. Letting go of perfection is a practice, one that requires patience and kindness towards yourself. In Buddhism, compassion is often described as the engine for real change. Not force, not shame, not fear. When you mess up, instead of berating yourself, you can pause and remember that making mistakes is human, not a sign of failure. You can tell yourself, it's okay to not be perfect. Nobody is, and I still have value, just as I am. Over time, the grip of perfectionism loosens, and your mind naturally begins to rest more easily. The relationship between perfectionism and suffering is so close that you might not even realize how tightly they are connected until you begin to untangle them. People find that the less pressure they put on themselves to be perfect, the lighter and more spacious life feels. Instead of feeling boxed in by expectations, you find yourself able to breathe more deeply, to laugh at small mishaps, and to reach out to others with empathy when they stumble too. Buddhist teachings bring your attention again and again to this idea. If striving for perfection creates suffering, and if that suffering is optional, why keep chasing it? Sometimes people resist this message because perfectionism has become so normalized. It's built into the soundtrack of modern life, encouraged by slogans, media, and sometimes even the people who love you. But when you actually talk to your friends, family, or co-workers, you quickly discover everyone feels the pressure, or at least almost everyone. That's why sharing your struggles with perfectionism out loud can be healing. It helps create a sense of connection instead of isolation. In a Buddhist view, sharing your true self, including your flaws and uncertainties, is an act of courage and kindness. There are simple ways to work with this tendency in daily life. For example, the next time you notice a critical thought about yourself, try pausing and asking whether that thought is really true. Is it based on evidence, or is it just an old habit? Sometimes the mind yells at you, "You are not enough." But if you look a little closer, you realize there's no real reason for this belief to be running your life. Noticing this can become a gentle mental habit, one that grows stronger each time you practice it. Buddhist teachings include countless stories of men and women who spent decades meditating only to realize that the idea of a perfect mind or a perfect practice was getting in the way of understanding themselves. Even highly respected teachers have admitted they still feel angry, sad, or confused at times. Their wisdom lies not in being flawless, but in being able to see these experiences for what they are. temporary, human, and nothing to be ashamed of. Hearing this from people who have devoted their lives to mindfulness can be a huge relief. It shows you that peace isn't about getting everything right. It's about relating to yourself and your experiences in a more forgiving and flexible way. You might also notice that letting go of perfectionism helps break down the barrier between you and others. When you stop expecting yourself to be perfect, you stop expecting it from everyone else too. You step into a more relaxed, enjoyable way of living, where small mistakes don't ruin your day or your opinion of someone else. Compassion grows naturally, and relationships deepen simply because everyone feels more willing to show who they really are. A practical tip for challenging perfectionism comes from Buddhist meditation traditions. When a mistake happens, or you fall short of a goal, pause and take a few slow breaths. Remind yourself that everyone experiences setbacks. Just because you didn't do something perfectly doesn't mean you are less lovable or valuable. You can even repeat a phrase quietly, like, "I am learning. I forgive myself for not being perfect." This may sound simple, but repeated regularly, it can help shift your inner attitude away from harshness and toward gentleness. Parents and teachers sometimes worry that if they stop pushing for perfection, children will become lazy or careless. But time and again, research and experience both show that kindness and encouragement are much better motivators over the long run. When you are not terrified of failure, you try new things, bounce back from disappointments, and stick with difficult tasks. Buddhist wisdom agrees. Growth and learning come when the mind is not frozen by fear and judgment. Another consequence of letting go of perfection is that you start to trust yourself more. When mistakes are not disasters, you become willing to make decisions, try new approaches, and express your real opinions, knowing that you do not have to be right or perfect every time. This willingness builds confidence in your own ability to navigate the ups and downs of life. You rely less on the opinions of others and more on your own quiet sense of balance. There are also deeper benefits. Buddhists talk a lot about inner freedom, the sense of being able to move through life without being chained by your thoughts and habits. If perfectionism is like a tight, uncomfortable shirt, letting go is like changing into something much lighter. You start to notice moments of real joy or gratitude. You see beauty not just in polished results, but in ordinary routines and honest conversations. Peace comes not from achieving perfection, but from living each day with curiosity and acceptance. When the urge to be perfect flares up, and it will because it's a stubborn habit, you can meet it with a mix of patience and humor. You can notice when your mind starts comparing you to someone else, and bring your attention back to what's really happening right now in your own life. You don't have to erase the thought, just recognize it as a passing story instead of a command. Each time you do this, the illusion of perfection loses a little of its power, and self-acceptance grows in its place. In Buddhist teaching, there's a clear and simple encouragement. Recognize that the chase for perfection is a trap, and that showing up honestly with all your strengths and weaknesses is enough. You are not a problem to solve or a project to finish. You are a living, changing human being, and that is enough, whether or not anything on your to-do list ever gets checked off perfectly. As you move forward, remember that the illusion of perfection is just that, an illusion. It is impossible to reach, and chasing after it only leads to more worry and less peace. Buddhism invites you to question this craving, to welcome your imperfections, and to focus on living each moment as it comes. With practice, the desire for perfection fades and is replaced by something much more real, a steady, caring acceptance of yourself and everyone else, just as you are. This is where true peace begins. As you move further toward this sense of steady acceptance that comes from seeing through perfectionism, what usually comes next is the question of how to actually relate to those parts of yourself you've been trying to ignore or fix for so long. Once you stop measuring your value by whether you get everything right, sooner or later you notice that you're left with a mix of qualities, some you like, and some you might wish were different. It's normal to feel awkward or uncomfortable about this at first, especially if you're used to thinking that all your flaws make you less worthy or deserving of kindness. The discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. In fact, from a Buddhist perspective, it's a kind of milestone. It means you are looking honestly at yourself, not just at the mask you show to others. The next step is learning to reframe what you might call flaws, not as marks of failure, but as normal parts of being human. This approach is at the heart of Buddhist wisdom for making peace with yourself. In daily life, everyone has certain qualities or patterns that are less than ideal. Maybe you get impatient in traffic, feel anxious before public speaking, procrastinate on important tasks, or struggle to forgive someone after an argument. Western culture often encourages people to hide these traits or feel ashamed of them, piling on even more judgment. Buddhist teachings go in the other direction. They invite you to see these so-called flaws not as mistakes to erase, but as useful signals, messages pointing to areas where you need more understanding, compassion, or simply a chance to slow down. The Buddhist word for compassion is karuna, which means responding to suffering, even your own, with care and wisdom instead of blame. One of the most striking shifts in Buddhist practice happens when you look at your weaknesses with genuine curiosity. Instead of instantly labeling nervousness, sadness, or social awkwardness as problems, you can start asking gentle questions. What does this feeling want me to notice? Am I protecting myself because of something from my past? Sometimes that sense of shame or anger you carry isn't even fully yours. It might come from your family, from society, or from an old situation you barely remember. By allowing yourself to look honestly without rushing toward judgment, you begin to see that flaws are not evidence you're broken. They are, more often, signs that you are sensitive, alive, responsive, or growing in new ways. Buddhist teachers often talk about the idea that everyone is carrying burdens you cannot see. Even people who seem relaxed and confident are juggling hidden challenges or facing private fears. Instead of believing that you are uniquely flawed, imagine what it would be like if everyone felt able to share their struggles out loud. Suddenly, the pressure drops. The person next to you might be struggling with insecurity, fear of failure, or anger just like you are. The Buddhist idea of Sangha is a community built around honesty and support, where people can practice accepting each other exactly as they are. When you look at yourself in this way, it becomes easier to think of your flaws as deeply human and not something that pushes you out of the circle. Another important point is how flaws connect to needs and vulnerabilities. For example, if you tend to be shy in groups, Buddhism would encourage you to look at that shyness as a sign that you are seeking comfort or safety, not as a sign of weakness. If you notice that you lose your temper easily, it might point to feelings of frustration or not being heard earlier in life. This doesn't excuse all behavior, but it helps you understand where it comes from. Buddhist wisdom isn't about letting yourself off the hook or ignoring the impact your actions have, but about bringing a deeper understanding to the patterns you want to change. When you approach your flaws without harshness, you are much more likely to find ways to address them with honesty, kindness, and creative solutions. Mistakes and less attractive qualities can actually teach you valuable things about yourself. If you're willing to sit quietly with embarrassment or regret, you can notice what triggers these feelings and what you wish could be different. Over time, the energy that used to go into hiding your vulnerabilities shifts toward taking good care of yourself. In Buddhist stories, many teachers describe moments of insight that happened specifically when they were facing their own limitations. The struggle was not a sign of failure, but a doorway to deeper self-knowledge. Over and over again, Buddhist practice comes back to the idea of metta, or loving kindness, as a way to treat all parts of yourself with respect. For people used to seeing life in terms of good and bad, right and wrong, it might sound strange to talk about loving your flaws, but Buddhist guidance says that rigid categories can do more harm than good. You are not just the sum of your successes. Your struggles, quirks, and sensitivities are not mistakes in a machine. They are parts of a bigger story about what it means to be human. When you shift from a perfectionistic view of fixing what's wrong to a more open view of learning from your whole self, the burden of shame often starts to dissolve. You have the space to practice forgiveness towards yourself, which is a relief after years of fighting inner battles you could never win. One of the gentle practices often taught is to actually say kind words to parts of yourself you want to reject. If you notice you're feeling anxious, you might pause and say, "This anxiety is difficult, but I can be patient with it." If you made a mistake at work, you could acknowledge, "That choice wasn't what I hoped for, but I can try to understand myself instead of just criticizing." This isn't a trick or empty positivity. It's a deliberate choice to turn gentle, especially when your instincts tell you to turn away. Over time, people find that their so-called flaws lose some of their sting. What's left is often a mix of humility and resilience. They can admit when they're struggling and still trust that they have value. The wisdom in all of this comes from knowing that being human means having a wide range of emotions and behaviors, and that none of them make you unworthy of kindness. Buddhism points out that suffering increases when you try to deny your reality. If you're sad but pretend to be happy, the sadness doesn't disappear. It just gets pushed under the surface and makes you feel even more lonely. If you're jealous of a friend's good luck, ignoring it won't help. But if you sit quietly and look at what's really true, the jealousy often softens. Treating your experience with openness makes it safe to learn from it instead of being ruled by it. People sometimes worry that if they accept their flaws, they'll lose motivation to change or improve. Buddhist practices answer this by saying that real growth comes from acceptance, not from shame. When you are honest about your habits or struggles, without panicking or falling into despair, you make space for wise choices. Small improvements become much more likely when you feel understood rather than judged. For example, learning to recognize anxiety as a message about what matters to you can help you plan ahead, ask for help, or adjust your routine. Seeing anger as a sign that something needs to be addressed lets you have more productive conversations about what you need. None of this is possible if you are too busy trying to erase your flaws instead of listening to them. This doesn't mean you celebrate every weakness or forget about the impact they can have on people around you. What Buddhism encourages is balancing honesty about your limitations with a soft, interested attitude. If you are too harsh, you hide from your own experience and lose access to your strength. If you are too passive, you might stop noticing what needs to change. The goal is to hold both awareness and kindness at the same time, knowing that self-compassion leads to more honest reflection, not less. Teachers in Buddhist traditions often recommend practices like keeping a gentle journal or pausing for a few breaths when you notice a strong reaction inside. Simple things like these become routine ways to check in with yourself. You might jot down, "Today I felt insecure when I tried something new, and that's okay." Or you could notice during an argument, "Anger is here right now, but I don't need to say something I'll regret." Over time, these kinds of mindful check-ins make it easier to spot old patterns and begin to shift them, not out of self-hate, but out of genuine curiosity for who you are becoming. Something else that Buddhist perspective brings is the idea that your so-called flaws connect you with other people. When you are honest about what you struggle with, it invites others to share their experiences too. Relationships can become richer because you're not just exchanging highlights, but building trust over shared humanity. Think of the last time someone admitted a fear or mistake to you. Usually it felt like a relief, maybe even made you respect them more. By being open and kind toward your own difficulties, you make it easier for friends and loved ones to do the same. This approach doesn't solve every problem overnight, and accepting your imperfections doesn't mean you'll never feel self-critical again. The point is to develop a practice of relating to your struggles with compassion first, not judgment. If you notice yourself criticizing an old habit or worrying you'll never change, you can take a step back and wonder, how can I support myself right now instead of making things worse? With time, the internal dialogue softens. You gain more insight, feel less isolated, and discover new ways of caring for both your strengths and the qualities that challenge you. Buddhist stories, both ancient and modern, are full of examples of people who struggled openly with their limitations. Rather than hiding flaws or pretending to be enlightened, respected teachers have described their anxieties, their tempers, their fears of public speaking, or their self-doubt. These stories are shared in Buddhist circles as reminders that wisdom does not mean being faultless. It means staying in honest touch with your humanity and recognizing that your value is never defined by perfection. The ability to face your whole self with both clarity and kindness is itself an accomplishment. What stands out about reframing flaws in the Buddhist sense is how relieving it is to let go of the exhausting job of self-correction. When you stop running from your insecurities and start examining them with a light touch, you build trust with yourself. Every time you respond to worry, anger, or shame with even one gentle word, you take another step away from old patterns of inner warfare. Life still brings surprises and challenges, but you become more prepared to notice your reactions and to choose wisely, rather than disappearing into guilt or blame. With practice, the qualities you once saw as failures can even become parts of your wisdom toolkit. Sensitive people, for example, learn to recognize early signs of stress or tension in those around them. Someone who struggles with self-doubt might develop an extra capacity for empathy, since they know what it feels like to be unsure. A person who has faced anger learns about boundaries. What was once an embarrassment or source of shame can gradually turn into a source of wisdom simply because you no longer waste energy fighting it. Learning to reframe your flaws is not the same as bragging about your imperfections or refusing to take responsibility for harm. It means living with both feet on the ground, in an honest relationship with yourself as a whole person. You can notice, for example, where your limitations make it harder to reach a goal and still hold yourself gently accountable to keep growing. You stop expecting to ever be finished or totally free of challenges, and instead begin to show up to each day with a sense of humility. This is why Buddhist practices so often talk about the middle way, not too harsh, not too loose, but steady, gentle attention to your real experience, flaws and all. In daily practice, this also includes how you talk to yourself. Start to catch the language of harsh inner criticism, even if it sounds true or familiar. When your mind says, "I'm so stupid for doing that," see if you can answer with, "Everyone makes mistakes and learns from them." If you hear, "I'll never get better at this," try, "Learning takes time and I can be patient." With repetition, kinder self-talk becomes more natural, and the old habit of relentless self-criticism slowly fades away. Mindfulness, as encouraged in Buddhist teachings, gives you the room to notice and respond rather than just react. All of this takes time. You are not expected to suddenly love every flaw or to immediately let go of lifelong habits of self-judgment. The shift is usually slow and sometimes uncomfortable, but every small act of kindness toward yourself is a real achievement. Over time, you may discover that you have more energy, more patience for yourself and others, and even a greater willingness to try new things, because you are no longer holding your whole life hostage to the idea of flawlessness. What often happens too is that by treating your own flaws more gently, you become a source of comfort and support for people around you. Others notice the difference, not just in what you say, but in the way you respond when they're struggling. Instead of offering tired advice or trying to fix what's wrong, you can just listen, encourage, and remind them you accept them as they are. These moments build a kind of quiet confidence, not only in your relationships with others, but in the trust you have for yourself. So, as you continue on this path of making peace with yourself, remember what Buddhism has made clear. You are not defined by a list of strengths and weaknesses. Your flaws do not need to be erased or hidden away. By meeting them with respect, curiosity, and compassion, you invite more honesty and calm into your life. Your imperfections are simply proof that you are here, living a full human life, worthy of kindness from yourself and others, no matter what. When you carry this friendlier, more open attitude toward your flaws, you might wonder where to look next, if you genuinely want to feel more settled inside. For so many people, there is a natural curiosity about how Buddhist wisdom actually helps with the day-to-day struggle of accepting yourself, especially when old habits and patterns keep popping up. At the center of Buddhist insight are the Four Noble Truths, which play a huge role in shifting how you connect with your struggles. These teachings are the foundation of many of the other Buddhist ideas, and they're straightforward enough that almost anyone can start to use them right away in daily life, whether you call yourself Buddhist or not. The Four Noble Truths offer a kind of clear map about why suffering happens and what you can do to lessen its hold, which naturally helps build self-acceptance in an honest and workable way. The first noble truth is often described in a very simple way. Life is challenging, and suffering is a normal part of the human experience. This doesn't mean life is only pain or disappointment. It's more about admitting that discomfort, worry, loss, and emotional upset are simply parts of being alive. There is no point in pretending pain never happens. Instead, this truth invites you to stop hiding from your difficulties or feeling ashamed that you have them. People are so often told to move on or just cheer up. But honest Buddhist advice is a reminder that suffering, in both small and big ways, is part of what connects all people. If you have ever felt embarrassed, jealous, lonely, heartbroken, or insecure, you're experiencing what nearly everyone goes through at some stage. Even if you sometimes wish you could escape discomfort forever, this first truth shows that you are not broken for feeling hurt. It is the most human experience in the world. Once you start to see suffering for what it is, a shared part of being alive, the next thing you might notice is how you react to it. This brings up the second noble truth, which says that most suffering is caused by attachment and aversion. These words might sound complicated, but what this really means is that the mind holds on tightly to what it wants attachment and pushes away what it doesn't want aversion. You might wish certain moments would last forever, or try desperately to avoid certain feelings or situations. The Buddhist perspective is that this constant tug of war, always chasing pleasure and fighting pain, keeps you feeling tense and dissatisfied inside. If you can recognize this habit, especially in how you relate to your own imperfections and tough feelings, you gain an important piece of freedom. For example, you might get caught up in, "I should always be happy," or "people must never see me make a mistake." When reality doesn't match these wishes, the disappointment can turn into anger or shame, and the cycle repeats itself. When you apply this second truth to self-acceptance, it reveals how much internal resistance drives your unhappiness. If you believe you must be a perfect parent, a flawless worker, or someone who never gets anxious, you will end up fighting a losing battle with your real feelings and behavior. Every time you fall short of those ideals, pain follows, not because of the mistake itself, but because you're holding so tightly to the idea that things must go only one way. The trap is not the feeling or flaw, but the relationship you have to it, how tightly you cling to being a certain version of yourself, and how hard you push away anything that might threaten it. That cycle is exhausting and often invisible if you have lived with it for years. The third noble truth brings good news. It says suffering can end, or at least get much lighter, when you release those habits of attachment and aversion. This doesn't mean shutting off your dreams, giving up on change, or becoming numb. It means allowing yourself to notice, feel, and gently let go of the urge to control every part of your experience. For self-acceptance, this means you stop needing to fix every flaw or run from every uncomfortable emotion. You begin to realize that just because a thought or feeling is present doesn't mean you have to obey it, judge it, or panic over it. The moment you give yourself permission to just be as you are, right now, with whatever mix of strengths and struggles you bring, the tension in your body and mind often begins to soften. Of course, letting go doesn't happen in an instant. The mind likes to pull you back to old patterns again and again. This is where the fourth noble truth is so helpful. It points to a practice, a path you can walk every day that is designed to reduce suffering little by little. In Buddhism, this is called the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes things like right understanding, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Each of these elements is about cultivating clarity and kindness, both toward others and yourself. While the details can take a lifetime to really understand, the spirit is practical. Move gently through your days, paying attention to what you do and why you do it, with the intention of causing less pain and more ease, both for yourself and those around you. In the area of self-acceptance, these Buddhist teachings suggest a handful of powerful shifts. Instead of asking, "How can I make myself perfect so I will finally be happy?" you can start asking, "How can I meet my life, including its imperfections, with honesty?" Instead of trying to conquer or exterminate negative thoughts and feelings, you get curious about them. What's really here right now? Am I suffering because of what's happening, or because I want something else so badly I can't notice what's real? This is not a mind game or a trick to push pain away. It's a wise practice of actually letting pain and imperfection have their place, without letting them take over everything. Working with the Four Noble Truths gives you a simple language to describe what is often a confusing or emotional experience. Take, for instance, the feeling you get when you make a mistake or embarrass yourself. Instead of spiraling into self-attack, "I'm the worst, how could I do that?" you can break the experience into manageable pieces. First, remember that everyone feels pain and embarrassment sometimes. Then, see if you can spot your mind's craving for perfection or its urge to push the problem away. If you spot these attachments, even just for a second, there is a little more room to breathe. What follows is not resignation, but a gentle shift toward the understanding that mistakes are inevitable and don't mean you are alone or unworthy. The practice becomes about recognizing these cycles as they happen. When anger, anxiety, or shame shows up, the first move isn't to judge the feeling, but to recognize its presence. It often helps to name the emotion quietly in your mind. Anger is here, sadness is here, insecurity is here. This kind of naming is a way of pausing, and it opens the door to understanding rather than fear. The Four Noble Truths support this process by reminding you that no pain comes from nowhere and no fear lasts forever, especially if you stop feeding it with all your energy or trying to push it away. One of the reasons this approach is effective is because it grounds you in reality without making you feel hopeless. Buddhist wisdom avoids the temptation to pretend that life can be perfect, which only leads to more pressure. Instead, it says life can include difficulties and uncertainties without those things ruining your self-worth or making you into a problem. When you accept that challenges are normal and that peace comes not from avoiding struggle but from relating to it differently, you can finally rest from the chase of self-improvement and perfection. As you use the Four Noble Truths in your life, you might notice that self-acceptance doesn't feel like giving up at all. It actually feels more like a doorway into a bigger world, one where you're allowed to be real and human. human, both hopeful and disappointed all at once. Rather than trying to win the impossible game of getting everything right, your focus moves toward just doing your best and learning from what happens along the way. When you do this, you're far less likely to spiral into guilt or self-criticism after a setback. Instead, there is more willingness to pause, breathe, and try again from a place of self-respect. If you look closely, much of modern stress comes from the belief that happiness is only possible someday. People say, "I'll be happy when I finally lose the extra weight, get the promotion, become a parent, or feel more confident." Buddhism, through the Four Noble Truths, gently points out that this way of thinking keeps you chasing after feelings that might never arrive. It asks you to step back and notice what's actually here in the present, with all its ups and downs, and see if you can bring just a little acceptance to what's true right now. When you practice this shift, you find it becomes easier to handle difficult days, forgive yourself for mistakes, and celebrate small moments of ease. You'll likely notice that with continued practice, the grip of shame, guilt, or anxiety gets a little weaker. When something goes wrong, there can still be disappointment or confusion, but it doesn't have to turn into a full-blown crisis of self-worth. There's space for those feelings, but there is also space for kindness and understanding to grow alongside them. This is what it means to normalize suffering, not in a negative way, but as a quiet relief. Instead of expecting life to cooperate with all your wishes, you meet it honestly and with a willingness to work with what you have. Using the Four Noble Truths also changes how you talk to other people about what you're facing. If a friend is going through a hard time, instead of giving quick advice or pretending you understand exactly how they feel, you can listen more deeply. You know from your own experience that pain is universal, but the solutions are deeply personal. Your ability to accept yourself with kindness allows you to show up with real empathy for the struggles of people you care about. There are practical steps rooted in these teachings that can help too. One is to spend a few minutes each day in simple reflection. Notice what kinds of attachments or aversions are most active right now. Are you holding tightly to the need to be seen a certain way? Are you pushing away a feeling you don't like? With curiosity, jot down what you find. This isn't about analyzing yourself endlessly, but about shining a light on the patterns that cause the most unnecessary stress. Sometimes just bringing these habits into awareness is enough to soften their impact. Another helpful approach is mindful breathing. Take several slow breaths and allow yourself to focus on nothing except the air coming in and out. As thoughts, judgments, or anxieties show up, and they always do, practice not clinging to them or fighting them. Let them pass, like hearing a sound in the distance. In this space, your mind gets a taste of what it feels like to rest in something other than the need to manage or control everything. Over time, these tiny breaks add up to a greater sense of calm and ease with yourself. Compassion practices also fit naturally here. When you notice self-judgment, imagine what you would say to a dear friend in the same situation. Often, you would never speak to someone you love the same way you speak to yourself in your harshest moments. Buddhist teachers encourage treating yourself with this same level of patience. Not because you deserve special treatment, but because this is how unnecessary suffering slowly dissolves and gets replaced by something steadier. Even when you mess up or fall into old habits, recognizing this through the lens of the Four Noble Truths allows for quicker recovery. You catch yourself, notice that attachment or aversion is showing up, and decide not to double down on shame or self-criticism. Instead, you start over gently, with a clearer mind and a little more courage to face whatever comes next. These resets are normal, and with practice, they become less dramatic. You start to remember that everyone falls down, and the most important thing is how you respond when it happens. The teachings of the Noble Eightfold Path, the practical guide connected to the last truth, can gently encourage you to pay attention to your everyday actions. Are you speaking kindly or harshly to yourself? Are your intentions supportive or full of hidden pressure? Are you choosing to act in ways that make life easier for yourself and others, or following old scripts that make things worse? The more you watch these patterns, the more you see the places where new choices are possible, even if those choices are small at first. As time goes by, the skills you develop become more natural. You notice suffering sooner, you spot its causes more clearly, and you remember that it can lessen as you relax your grip. You live with a little less fear that every wrong step will ruin everything, and with more trust that you can learn from both your successes and your failures. Self-acceptance becomes less of a desperate wish and more of a quiet fact, something you grow into and rely on rather than something you have to force. Over and over, daily situations give you the chance to apply these truths in real time. When you feel left out, when you make a mistake, when old insecurities show up, you have a practical toolkit for understanding what's happening and responding wisely. The focus shifts from how can I escape pain into how can I be gentle with myself and keep moving forward. That's a shift that makes a real difference in how you sleep, work, and relate to just about everyone. Probably the most surprising effect of committing to this approach is seeing how much your relationships improve alongside your relationship with yourself. People begin to trust your openness, you become a more patient listener, and forgiveness, both for yourself and others, no longer seems impossible. There is less artificial distance and more honest connection, because self-acceptance leads to more acceptance of others as well. None of this means you become passive or stop caring about your growth. In fact, accepting life as it is makes it possible to find truly meaningful change. Since you aren't trapped in denial or constant frustration, you can set new goals, try out different habits, and take on challenges from a foundation of compassion and realism. You act because you care about reducing suffering, not because you're haunted by feelings of inadequacy. What stands out most about using the Four Noble Truths for self-acceptance is that you don't have to wait for some special moment to start. Every day offers fresh chances to observe where suffering appears, to recognize your old habits of clinging and resisting, and to gently practice letting go. With a sincere effort and a bit of patience, this way of seeing can transform the relationship you have with yourself. Even when life is unpredictable or difficult, you'll find yourself able to meet more moments with openness and a kind of inner steadiness. Staying close to these foundational teachings makes it easier to trust that your self-worth doesn't depend on never making mistakes or always feeling good. Instead, it rests on being willing to face reality honestly, to care for your life with as much patience as you would offer to anyone else, and to know that real acceptance is always possible, no matter where you start from today. Even as you start to notice these shifts happening, where self-acceptance is growing and your expectations gently start to adjust, it's practical to wonder how you can keep this balanced attitude going through the real twists of daily life. That's where mindfulness starts to become incredibly valuable. In Buddhism, mindfulness is not just a buzzword or a passing trend. It is simply about paying attention to what is happening right now in your own mind and body without jumping to conclusions or harsh judgments. People from all backgrounds have discovered that this very ordinary kind of awareness is actually at the heart of quieting down the inner critic and finding a more peaceful relationship with yourself. Mindfulness does not require you to stop your thoughts or become instantly calm. The point is not to magically erase stress or banish negative emotions. In fact, Buddhist teachings say the opposite. Part of being mindful means noticing exactly what is happening, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and giving yourself a chance to really see your inner experience as it is, not how you wish it could be. In a world full of distractions, the habit of checking in with the present moment can sound almost too simple to matter, but most habits that cause suffering happen automatically when the mind is rushing, worrying, or drifting on autopilot. Mindfulness offers a way to hit pause and look again with curiosity. If you start paying attention to the moments when self-judgment flares up, you'll usually see they arrive out of old patterns and fast reactions. Maybe a moment of embarrassment, a small mistake, or even just a memory triggers a whole script of negative thinking. Why do I always do this? Will I ever change? The next thing you know, your chest is tight, your mood has dropped, and you are in full damage control mode, scanning for what else is wrong. Buddhist mindfulness practice is an invitation to stop that runaway process for even a few seconds. Instead of immediately believing every thought or spiraling into worry, you learn to notice, this is that old story showing up again. That split second of awareness is a powerful moment because it lets you choose how to respond instead of being swept away. Bringing mindfulness into your daily life is not complicated, but it is very different from how most of us were taught to handle discomfort. Usually, the urge is to fix what feels bad or distract yourself with something pleasant. But mindfulness asks, can I sit with what is happening just for a breath or two? What does anxiety, frustration, or even boredom actually feel like right now? When you check in this way, you might be surprised. Often, thoughts that seemed overwhelming are just echoes from earlier experiences, and feelings that seemed endless start to shift once you stop fighting them. It turns out the mind's reactions are much less threatening when you observe them, not as problems to solve, but as simple passing events. For most people, learning the basics of mindfulness begins with something familiar, like the breath. You might sit for a few moments, close your eyes if that's comfortable, and simply notice the feeling of breathing in and out. You don't need to breathe any special way. The point is not to relax on command, but to give your attention a simple home base. When the mind wanders, as it always does, you bring it back to the breath, gently and without criticism. Every time you notice your thoughts drifting or a worry appearing, you are practicing a better kind of noticing. This is what mindful awareness feels like, staying with each experience as it happens, returning over and over to what is real now. This same attention can be directed toward any thought, emotion, or even a body sensation that comes up. Say you are feeling anger. With mindfulness, the practice is not to push anger away or pretend it's not there, but to look more closely. How does this emotion feel in my body? Where does it show up? What are the thoughts fueling it right now? By becoming curious instead of judgmental, you learn that no single feeling or thought can last forever. They show up, rise and fall, and eventually move on, especially if you don't pile on extra stories about what they mean about your character. One of the helpful things about mindfulness is that it isn't only for formal meditation sessions. You can practice mindful awareness while walking to the store, eating a meal, listening to music, or talking to someone you care about. You simply notice when your mind leaves the current moment and gently guide it back. If a judgment or awkwardness appears, you label it softly, judging is here or worrying is here, and then get back to really hearing, really tasting, or moving with the moment. This ongoing attention is not about control, but about curiosity and openness. People who make mindfulness a steady part of life often report that their inner critic's voice becomes easier to notice and less believable over time. The habit of watching thoughts and feelings, rather than always obeying or believing them, creates just enough space to respond with compassion instead of reactivity. For example, instead of lashing out or shutting down when you feel triggered, you might pause, breathe, and take stock. Something uncomfortable is happening, and I don't have to fix it right away. This patience is not an excuse to avoid responsibility or drift into passivity. It's a chance to act more wisely, seeing the whole story before making a big move. A major benefit here is that mindfulness lets you witness not just your struggles, but also the small moments of joy, comfort, or peace that often get overlooked. When the mind isn't busy criticizing or replaying regrets, it becomes easier to notice a friend's kind smile, the taste of morning coffee, or the sound of rain outside your window. The ability to be present with the good moments helps refill your sense of ease and resilience, so you're less shaken when difficulties show up, and when those rough patches do come, the same mindful stance helps you keep perspective. This hurts right now, but it's only part of my story. It won't last forever. It's normal, especially in the beginning, to feel like your mind is just too busy or critical for mindfulness to make a difference. You sit down to pay attention, and suddenly lists, judgments, worries, or memories seem to crowd your awareness. That's totally normal. Buddhist teachers emphasize that the point is not to have a blank mind, but to notice what your mind naturally does. Even short bursts of mindful awareness build confidence that you are not at the mercy of thoughts or feelings. Each time you become aware of wandering or self-criticism and kindly return to the present, you are building a new way of relating to your inner world. What makes this practice sustainable is the quality of kindness you bring to yourself. If harshness or impatience shows up, say, you catch yourself being judgmental while meditating, the approach is not to double down on criticism, but to acknowledge impatience is here, and let that be part of the experience. In fact, many people discover that the more gently they treat their own lapses and awkward moments, the more quickly the inner critic grows quiet. It's this particular mix of honesty and goodwill that Buddhist mindfulness traditions value most. Another aspect of mindfulness that gradually changes things is the way it helps you separate thoughts from reality. Not every thought that crosses your mind is a fact or a prophecy. Mindfulness gives you the chance to treat thoughts like the weather, sometimes stormy, sometimes clear, but always passing. When a negative, self-critical thought appears, you can notice it without needing to accept it as true or react against it with panic. That's a thought, not a command, you might say to yourself. This small shift is a really big deal for those who have been stuck in cycles of anxiety, insecurity, or rumination. If you spend many years believing your self-judgments without question, breaking this habit can feel awkward at first. But with steady, mindful awareness, you start to learn what your mind's patterns actually are. Maybe you see the same doubts or worries show up at certain times of day, around certain people, or during particular activities. Instead of feeling attacked by your own mind, you understand its habits with more patience and even humor. It's like getting to know an old, sometimes cranky friend. You don't need to always listen, but you can respect that these patterns are just mental habits, not unchangeable truths. With time and regular practice, mindfulness makes it much more possible to experience moments of quiet and acceptance. Even if the world around you or your own mood isn't perfect, this sense of peacefulness is not about zoning out or ignoring problems, but about being present enough to handle what needs handling, and to rest when nothing can be changed. Mindful awareness slowly builds a buffer against extreme stress and keeps you in touch with the real rhythms of life. Sometimes easy, sometimes hard, always changing. A lot of people think mindfulness is only about sitting on a cushion or practicing formal meditation, but for daily life, the key is repetition and informality. That means checking in during simple transitions, taking a breath while you wash your hands, feeling your feet touch the floor as you step into a new room, noticing tension in your shoulders before a phone call, or pausing to listen to the evening breeze as you end your day. These tiny slices of attention, scattered throughout daily routines, slowly add up to a more steady kind of presence. Buddhist teachers often stress that progress in mindfulness is not about being perfect and never getting distracted. It is about always coming back again and again with patience and kindness to your actual experience. You can start over as many times as you need. It is the regular act of returning to the present moment that builds both confidence and calm. Even if your life is busy, these practices are portable and flexible. They can happen anytime and anywhere and don't require any special equipment or perfect environment. Over weeks and months, people who dedicate a bit of time to mindfulness notice some real changes. They find themselves less caught in old arguments or repetitive regrets, more willing to accept difficult emotions, and quicker to enjoy small pleasures. When anxiety, anger, or self-doubt shows up, the urge to react immediately softens. Instead, there is room to choose. Do I need to say or do something now, or can I wait until I feel calmer? This sense of choice, of responding instead of reacting, brings real freedom from old habits that cause suffering. Mindful awareness also changes how you view mistakes. Instead of proving your deepest fears about yourself, a slip-up becomes just another event in a day, often with something useful to teach. When you meet mistakes with the basic attitude of, I see what happened and I can learn from it, shame is much less likely to stick around or grow. This approach turns self-compassion into a skill, not just a feeling. Over time, it makes it much safer to try new things, take risks, and experiment with change, since the punishment for imperfection is so much lighter. Friendships and family life shift too, because mindfulness encourages you to be really present with people instead of only thinking about what to say next or judging how things are going. When you listen with real attention, it shows. Little misunderstandings are cleared up faster, and the time you spend with people feels more meaningful because you are actually there, not caught up in private worries or distractions. This applies just as much to moments of conflict as to peaceful times. Staying present can take the sting or drama out of disagreements, and sometimes helps you recognize when it is best to step back. As mindful awareness becomes more familiar, some people also notice that old patterns of emotional avoidance start to weaken. If, in the past, you ignored feelings like sadness or fear, mindfulness practice gives you the courage to sit with those feelings and learn from them. The lesson, over time, is that you don't drown in discomfort. It comes and goes, and you grow more resilient each time you face it without panic. This builds real emotional intelligence and a much deeper trust in your own ability to handle whatever comes up. There are many stories from Buddhist teachings about people who found real relief simply by learning to stay with what they were experiencing. Sometimes this meant sitting quietly with difficult emotions. Sometimes it meant appreciating a moment of ease or happiness. And sometimes it meant forgiving themselves after old patterns resurfaced. The common thread is that mindful awareness, applied over time, gives everyone a chance to show up for their own lives with a kind of grace that is not possible when the mind is lost in regret, planning, or self-judgment. Eventually, mindfulness opens the door to a quieter, more reliable kind of self-acceptance. The stories you once believed about yourself, being too anxious, too slow, too sensitive, or too flawed, begin to lose their hold. When negative patterns show up, you no longer react with panic or despair. You remember, instead, that this too is part of my experience right now, and let things unfold a bit more naturally. This brings both comfort and practical benefit. You can sleep better at night, tackle your responsibilities with less pressure, and relate to others with a sense of patience and ease. Bringing mindful awareness into your daily routine is ultimately about building a healthy habit of presence. It doesn't require a new philosophy or a dramatic lifestyle change. With just a little attention spread out in the ordinary moments of your life, you can ease the grip of old judgments and start trusting your own to meet life as it actually is. In this real, steady way, mindfulness becomes a lifelong companion designed to help you meet the ups and downs with greater balance and a much kinder heart toward yourself. Once mindful awareness becomes a more natural part of your day, the door opens to an even deeper level of self-care, a kind of heartfelt friendliness toward yourself that Buddhist teachings call loving kindness. In Buddhism, loving kindness is more than just good intentions. It's a practice, something you return to again and again, especially during moments when your inner critic flares up or old doubts resurface. The traditional term for this is metta. Metta means nurturing a genuine, caring attitude toward yourself and others, no matter what your mood is or what flaws and difficulties you meet. Often, people think kindness is something you either have or you do not have. But in Buddhist practice, it is seen as a skill, one you can develop with patience, repetition, and a little courage. You might notice that it is sometimes easier to be gentle and forgiving with friends, family, or even strangers than it is with yourself. If a friend is upset or has made a mistake, your first response might be to offer comfort, encouragement, or a promise that mistakes are normal. But when it comes to your own struggles, the tone inside can get much harsher, louder, or even punishing. Buddhist teachers have spotted this pattern in people from all backgrounds, from monks to everyday folks. That's why metta practices are designed to turn the warmth of compassion you might offer others back toward yourself first. The simple logic is that if you want to live with more peace and less inner conflict, it will serve you well to treat yourself with the same basic humanity you show to those you care about. A practical way to begin with loving kindness is through guided phrases. These are quiet wishes or reminders you repeat, either silently in the mind or softly out loud, focused on yourself to start. The most common phrases are straightforward. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. The words aren't magic, and you don't need to feel emotional every time you say them. The value comes in the repetition, in letting these intentions plant new seeds in how you relate to your own ups and downs. Even if you do not wholly believe the phrases at first, each time you offer yourself these simple wishes, you loosen the grip of old criticism and make space for a more accepting state of mind. You can practice loving kindness meditation almost anywhere, sitting, standing, or walking. You don't need hours of silence or any special setting. You might start by settling your body, closing your eyes if comfortable, and breathing naturally for a few moments. Begin by saying your caring phrases to yourself in your mind. If your mind wanders or doubts pop up, like "this is silly" or "I don't deserve kindness," just notice them and keep going. The practice is not about forcing yourself to feel something, but about building a reliable habit of self-kindness, even when doubts or awkwardness are present. A powerful thing happens when you stick with this practice over time. The inner critic's voice, which may have been loud and automatic for years, gradually softens. You may also become more aware of the quiet, tender moments in daily life. Maybe a small success at work, the relief of finishing a long day, or a sudden bit of appreciation for your own effort. Research on loving kindness meditation has shown that it helps reduce self-criticism and increases feelings of well-being, even after just a few weeks of regular practice. People report feeling less lonely, more patient with their flaws, and more motivated to take care of themselves in healthy, balanced ways. Often, resistance shows up early on. You might worry that practicing self-kindness will make you lazy, selfish, or less responsible. This is a common concern, but Buddhist teachers point out that just the opposite happens. When you meet yourself with warmth instead of judgment, you're not lowering your standards or making excuses. You're creating the emotional safety needed to look at your mistakes, needs, and hopes honestly. From this foundation, it is much easier to try new things, repair relationships, or make needed changes in life. Guilt and shame tend to freeze people, while kindness and understanding support real transformation. Another helpful part of metta practice is its flexibility. If basic phrases do not fit what you need, you can craft your own. Maybe you need to wish yourself courage for a tough conversation, or patience during illness, or forgiveness after a hard day. The goal is always the same: to keep reminding yourself that your worth does not depend on being perfect. You can send loving kindness to memories of your younger self, offering care toward old wounds or regrets, or point it toward parts of yourself you've tried to ignore, such as anxiety or restlessness, saying, "May I gently accept this part of me too?" Over months, your attitude shifts from fighting with your experience to holding it with greater respect and friendliness. If the idea of self-love feels uncomfortable or foreign, it often helps to imagine what you would say to someone you truly care about. Would you demand they never fail? Would you tell them their mistakes make them unlovable? Most likely not. By using simple, kind language with yourself, you model the same encouragement you would offer anyone else going through a hard time. The more often you practice, the more believable these messages become. It's like strengthening a muscle you might not have used in a long time. It's also worth mentioning that loving kindness is not just for calm or peaceful times. It's actually most useful in moments of real difficulty, when shame, anger, sadness, or self-doubt are active. In Buddhism, it's encouraged to direct metta toward whatever hurts most. If you're feeling anxious, for instance, bring a kind wish directly to that experience. May I feel at ease with this anxiety. If you're grieving, may I find comfort in my sorrow. This is not bypassing or minimizing pain, but meeting it with the oldest, most patient part of your heart. When loving kindness touches suffering, it often shrinks its power and makes recovery feel possible. In everyday life, people bring metta to moments big and small, after stubbing a toe, during a stressful meeting, while waiting for test results, or when reflecting on a day that did not go as planned. The practice is portable. Some write a self-kindness phrase on a sticky note for the bathroom mirror or set reminders in their phone. Others take a breath and repeat their phrase quietly before an important phone call or meeting. Over time, self-kindness moves from being an occasional practice to a normal, gentle backdrop for your mind. Buddhist teachings make it clear that loving kindness and self-care do not make you self-centered. Quite the opposite. When you treat yourself well, it becomes much easier to extend genuine care to others without resentment or exhaustion. If you've ever tried to help someone while feeling depleted, you know it's hard to be truly present. Metta restores some patience, steadiness, and generosity, making it possible to show up for others and for life's demands with more balance. Even when old doubts or judgments return, kindness gives you a softer landing and a better chance to respond rather than react. You might notice that loving kindness gradually changes your outlook on your own limits. For instance, when you get sick or make a mistake, the first reaction may be frustration. Over time, with steady self-kindness, you start to feel more understanding, even about your rough edges. Instead of telling yourself, "I should do better," "I never get it right," you now remember, it's okay to have limits, it's natural to be learning. This approach does not take away responsibility or ignore growth. It makes room for you to keep trying, with persistence and dignity, no matter how things go. Metta practice also dovetails beautifully with other mindfulness habits. The more you notice your present experience, the more opportunities there are to insert a phrase of self-kindness or a moment of warmth. During meditation, you can blend mindful awareness of what arises with a gentle wish for yourself, like, "May I be patient with this moment." If you are feeling particularly critical or restless, you can pause and offer an extra phrase, "May I forgive myself for feeling this way." These small moves change the overall tone of your inner dialogue and prepare you to handle challenges with much less struggle. A common question is whether you need to feel loving or inspired for the practice to work. Buddhist teachers and researchers say no, you do not need special feelings, only a willingness to practice regularly. Some days the words feel rote or your mind is distracted or grumpy. Other days, repeating a phrase of loving kindness brings quick relief or comfort. The value comes from consistency, not intensity. Think of these wishes as a way of shaping habits. Each repetition is a gentle reminder of your right to kindness, even on complicated days. science backs up what Buddhist tradition has observed for centuries. Studies on loving-kindness meditation show measurable benefits in both mood and health. Regular metta practice is linked to reduced symptoms of depression, higher resilience against stress, and a stronger immune response. People who practice loving-kindness feel more connected to both themselves and others and tend to manage setbacks with greater patience and adaptability. These effects do not require years of training. Even just a few weeks of steady effort can shift how people talk to themselves in difficult moments. Sometimes it's helpful to practice loving-kindness in a group, whether in person or online. Shared silence, gentle reminders, or the sound of many people quietly repeating their intentions creates a supportive atmosphere. If you are new to the practice, this kind of group energy can make it easier to keep going, especially on days when self-judgment is strong, but practicing on your own at home, or whenever you remember throughout the day, works just as well. As time passes, loving kindness becomes less about doing a meditation technique and more like a steady light in the background of your life. Moments that might have triggered blame or regret instead call for a little extra warmth and care. You begin to notice, maybe for the first time, that you do not have to wait until you have fixed everything or become flawless to offer yourself kindness. The practice doesn't promise to erase every problem. It helps you remember your value and your basic goodness, even during messy, stressful, or painful seasons of life. Taking this approach also changes how you relate to others. When you know inwardly that you deserve care no matter what happens, you naturally extend that same grace to friends, family, and even strangers. Relationships soften, and conversations feel less like competitions or struggles. It becomes easier to encourage others, listen well, and forgive small slips. Even in tough situations where conflict is present, loving kindness helps interrupt the usual cascade of anger or bitterness, making reconciliation and understanding more likely. The beauty of Buddhist loving kindness is how down-to-earth it is. It asks only for your willingness to begin where you are, with the words and worries and wishes you have right now. If you wake up feeling grumpy, you offer yourself patience. If you have a moment of pride or joy, you let yourself receive it without guilt. If you feel overwhelmed by a long to-do list, the practice is to bring some kindness to the overwhelm itself. This flexible and forgiving spirit is what has drawn so many people to metta, not only in temples and meditation halls, but in apartments, offices, schools, and parks around the world. After just a few weeks or months of making loving kindness a regular part of your routine, you will probably notice that your relationship with yourself feels less tense and more hopeful. The edge of self-judgment recedes, replaced with a steadier ability to comfort yourself and remain on your own side in the face of challenges. You have room to admit mistakes and to celebrate successes, to feel pain honestly without letting it define you, and to keep growing and learning with every day that passes. With metta at your back, making peace with yourself no longer seems like an impossible task. It feels like a process that gently unfolds, supported by the simple truth that kindness is always an option, no matter what the day brings or how you happen to feel. In this way, loving kindness meditation becomes both the anchor and the ongoing reminder of your fundamental worthiness, helping you meet life's ups and downs with a compassionate, unshakable heart. When loving kindness becomes part of how you treat yourself, daily experiences start to feel different, especially those moments that would have triggered self-doubt or harsh criticism before. Something subtle but powerful can change when you accept that being kind to yourself is not about perfection, but about how you show up for yourself, whether things go well or not. Once this attitude begins to settle, another big area you'll find relief in is understanding the Buddhist teaching on control. Specifically, how much of our daily struggle comes from the urge to tightly manage every part of life, especially ourselves. From early on, most people are taught to believe that the more they control, the safer or happier they'll become. You see it in routines, ambitions, and the way we plan our days, often down to the smallest detail. Every phone reminder, every checklist, every attempt to get it together shows how normal it feels to keep a grip on what's going on around and inside us. But Buddhist wisdom, collected over more than 2,000 years, offers a helpful counterpoint. At its core, the teaching says that the world, our lives, our emotions, even our minds, is always changing, and there are limits to what we can truly control. This lesson can sound uncomfortable at first, especially if you've worked hard to be responsible and keep problems at bay. Yet, learning to relax your grip and respond to life as it really is can bring a huge sense of peace and openness, especially when it comes to accepting yourself. If you look closely, much of the inner frustration people feel ties back to an invisible script of needing things to go in a certain pre-approved way. This shows up in small, everyday moments, like feeling annoyed if traffic makes you late, or getting upset if your plans fall through at the last minute. On a bigger scale, it appears when you get frustrated with yourself for not achieving a certain goal quickly enough, or for feeling emotions you think you should not have. In Buddhist practice, there's a clear reminder that while you can put in effort and make thoughtful choices, trying to guarantee certain outcomes or fix yourself perfectly will only lead to disappointment and stress. The Buddhist view is not against planning or trying to improve your life. After all, effort and discipline are valued for learning meditation and living kindly. The difference is in your attitude. If you treat life like something that must bend to your will, every surprise or setback starts to feel like a personal failure. The urge to control takes over your time, attention, and even your ability to relax. Instead of seeing challenges as part of a bigger process, you might slip into frustration, overthinking, or self-blame. By contrast, when you practice letting go of the need to control, it does not mean ignoring responsibilities or caring less about yourself or your goals. It means learning to respond to what is happening with flexibility and trust, rather than rigid demands or harsh self-judgment. One way you can see the difference is in how you speak to yourself when life turns unpredictable. When things go wrong, a late bus, a sudden illness, a missed deadline, the controlling mind spirals into tension, sometimes snapping with, "Why can't I ever do anything right?" or "I should have planned better." The mind that is willing to let go of control, on the other hand, starts to say, "All right, this is not what I wanted, but it's what is here now. How can I care for myself and move forward, even if it's uncomfortable?" That shift is not always easy, and it often takes practice, but it makes the difference between being stuck in self-criticism and meeting your experience with kindness, even when it is disappointing or confusing. Buddhist practices help you notice how tight your grip can get around certain outcomes or emotions. For example, if you meditate and expect instant calm, you'll probably feel frustrated when restless thoughts keep popping up. If you try to be happy all the time, moments of sadness or anger feel like a failure. Buddhist teachers suggest asking yourself, where am I trying to force something that cannot be forced? This question is not about guilt, it's about bringing a sense of honesty to the gap between what you want and what is actually happening. This observation takes the pressure off, even in small ways, allowing you to deal with life's changes and your own emotions with less of a fight. Throughout everyday life, opportunities to practice letting go of control pop up constantly. You might have an argument with a friend and want to replay it, wishing for a different outcome. Or maybe you're struggling with your own insecurities, telling yourself that, by now, I should be over this. Buddhist wisdom encourages meeting these experiences head-on without pushing them away or gripping them tighter. Instead, you might pause, breathe, and admit, this is tough, but I cannot force myself to change feelings or circumstances immediately. I can give myself space and patience instead. In doing this, you give your mind and emotions a little room to shift on their own, a process that cannot be rushed by willpower alone. Letting go does not mean giving up or being passive. It means recognizing where your influence ends and where it makes sense to allow situations or feelings to arise and fade. In meditation, that might look like sitting quietly with a racing mind, noticing thoughts about what should or shouldn't be happening and not trying to silence them by force. In daily life, it could mean allowing yourself to feel disappointed or upset after a setback, without judging yourself for having those feelings. By practicing these small acts of surrender, you train yourself to trust that every emotion, every situation has its own rhythm of coming and going. One of the most powerful results of letting go is the space it creates for natural growth and even joy. When you are not constantly demanding that life or your mind look a certain way, there is room to be surprised by what's working well, or to appreciate moments of rest and comfort. Small successes and pleasures show up more easily because your attention isn't focused on what's missing or on every imperfection. You also have more patience for setbacks and mistakes. Instead of getting stuck on what you should have done, you start asking, what can I do now? That change makes it much easier to move through challenges with less drama and more skill. Noticing the urge to control is a good first step. Buddhist teachers often suggest that when you catch yourself stuck in self-criticism or anxious planning, you pause and simply make note of what's happening. For example, you could say to yourself, I'm trying really hard to control this and it's not working. And this kind of honest recognition can be uncomfortable, but it is also freeing. It lets you step back from repetitive thoughts or actions, if only for a moment, and see what else is possible in that space. It can also help to focus on what you do have control over. No one can erase all mistakes or prevent every difficulty, but you always have influence over your attitude and your next step. You can choose to take a breath, to ask for help, or to approach a problem in a new way. Even when big goals seem out of reach, focusing on the small actions you can take right now is often more productive and far kinder to your sense of self. Buddhist practice is about turning your energy toward the present moment and your current intentions, rather than becoming tangled in old worries or future fears. In relationships with others, letting go of control is just as important. When you demand that people act a certain way or expect constant approval, frustration is nearly guaranteed. You cannot control other people's reactions or make everyone like you, no matter how well you behave. Accepting this truth makes you more compassionate and flexible with both yourself and others. Instead of blaming yourself for conflicts or misunderstandings, you can see them as a natural part of life, respond as skillfully as you can, and let go of what you cannot change. As this new attitude takes root, you may notice that situations become less draining. You don't have to monitor every word or action because you accept that mistakes and misunderstandings are part of communicating and living with others. You become more willing to express yourself honestly and listen to other points of view. The constant pressure to predict and manage every outcome fades as you accept your own limits and trust yourself to manage challenges as they come. Letting go of control also changes how you relate to your personal goals and dreams. Many people are taught to set objectives and chase results with maximum intensity, focusing only on success. When you become obsessed with results, though, the experience itself can lose its meaning. Perfection becomes the only standard, and any misstep feels devastating. But with a Buddhist perspective, you learn to put effort into what matters, without being harsh or discouraged if things don't go exactly to plan. Trying your best is important, but so is recognizing that results are influenced by so many unpredictable factors: timing, other people's choices, life circumstances, and your own changing energy. When something does not work out, you can grieve, learn, and adapt, but you don't need to punish yourself for not controlling every outcome. In creative projects, in work, and even in family life, this attitude makes space for more experimentation and curiosity. You're willing to try new approaches without being paralyzed by the risk of failure. You listen more closely to feedback, accept that you might need to change direction, and keep moving, even if things do not go perfectly. This makes the process of change feel less like a test and more like honest day-to-day living. During the toughest periods, sickness, loss, or uncertainty, letting go of control is one of the most compassionate things you can practice. It's easy to want the world to make sense or heal as quickly as possible, but Buddhist wisdom points out that pain often lasts longer than we wish, and that healing is never a straight line. By allowing yourself to sit with discomfort, reach out for support, and let time do its work, you give yourself the best chance to move forward. When you stop demanding instant solutions or blaming yourself for normal human struggles, the process of recovery and resilience unfolds more naturally. Some Buddhist practices use specific meditations to remind you of impermanence and the limits of control. These might include reflecting on nature, paying attention to your own breath, or reciting phrases that encourage acceptance and trust. Others suggest keeping a daily gratitude or acceptance journal, simply spending a few moments each night recalling something you let be without forcing it to change. With repetition, these small rituals retrain your mind to pause when control-seeking shows up and invite a more relaxed, open response. Buddhist monks often share that after years of practice, the urge to control never disappears completely, but it gets easier to notice, to laugh at gently, and to loosen. If you find yourself slipping into old habits of self-blame or rigid planning, you don't have to judge yourself for it. Instead, take it as a sign to breathe, reflect, and return to an attitude of gentle, honest care for yourself and the situation at hand. Letting go does not erase concern, ambition, or the desire to make things better. It means holding those wishes with a looser hand. It makes daily life more spontaneous, allows for real moments of gratitude, and boosts resilience. You are less likely to get stuck when things go wrong because you trust that new opportunities, feelings, and insights will come if you meet your experience with an open mind. This approach leads to a much less judgmental and more hopeful perspective, You stop defining yourself only by your results and begin to respect your effort, your intentions, and your willingness to keep learning. You become someone who responds to life rather than struggling against it all the time. Even on days when nothing goes as planned, you can say, "This is not the day I wanted. Still, I can be good to myself, and tomorrow will bring new chances." Living with less control makes relationships, work, and your own mind feel like more friendly territory. With steady attention, patience, and regular self-kindness, you trade endless pressure for a kind of open strength that adapts, recovers, and welcomes whatever comes next. No matter how unpredictable the day may be, that open, flexible way of responding to life naturally brings you face to face with a reality that is at the core of Buddhist wisdom. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same forever. If you take a closer look at almost any problem that troubles your mind, you will find some resistance to change at its heart. People get used to the idea that if they could only freeze a happy moment, or hold on to success, or keep difficult feelings away for good, then peace would finally be possible. Yet, time and experience always show that things just don't work that way. In Buddhism, this truth is called impermanence, and it is not meant as something sad or negative, but as a gentle reminder that clinging to sameness or fighting against change is exactly what creates so much of the suffering and inner struggle we experience. Most people notice early on that life is full of changes, some welcome, some challenging. Maybe you wake up feeling good, but by lunchtime you're frustrated about work or school. One day you feel close to your friends or family, and the next, a misunderstanding brings distance. You finish a task and feel proud, only to be anxious again when a new responsibility comes along. This endless motion is part of the natural flow of life, and yet the mind often wants to grab onto what feels comfortable and push away anything new or uncomfortable. Buddhist teachers have watched this pattern for more than 2,000 years and have shown that the quicker you see the shifting nature of feelings, situations, and even your own self-image, the easier it gets to find peace in the middle of daily ups and downs. When people begin to practice meeting change with curiosity instead of fear, they often describe feeling lighter. They see that difficult emotions like jealousy, anger, or sadness really do ebb and flow. Even the most persistent worries shift over hours or days. If you pay attention, you can track this in your own life. You might notice how a piece of bad news feels less intense after a good night's sleep, or how a moment of embarrassment turns into a funny story after some time passes. It can even help to look at changes in your body, how your core energy changes from morning to evening, or how your preferences for food or music shift over the years. When you see that change is the normal state of things, you don't need to panic or attack yourself when old worries or insecurities return. Just acknowledging, "Right now this feels tough, but it's probably temporary," can be a huge help. There's a reason Buddhist meditation often draws attention to the breath or to body sensations. These are always changing, and by simply sitting quietly and watching how one breath gives way to the next, how tension rises and fades in your shoulders or back, you start to see that change is happening on a very basic level. Even your thoughts are always in motion. You might sit down to meditate and get lost in memories, but a moment later, you're suddenly focused on your plans for the weekend. And after that, you might notice a physical itch or a feeling of calm. This constant shifting is totally natural. By training yourself to witness these changes without needing to fix or control them, you become less likely to judge yourself harshly when strong feelings or worries show up. One big benefit of accepting impermanence is how much it takes the pressure off being stuck or broken. Sometimes, when feeling sad or anxious, it's easy to believe that you'll feel this way forever. But if you step back and reflect on countless moods and phases you've lived through, good or bad, you see a pattern. Nothing lasts indefinitely. If you're having a hard day, Buddhist teachings suggest gently reminding yourself, "This is what it's like right now," instead of, "This is how I'll always feel." This isn't denial, just a wiser way to handle the real pain that comes with tough emotions. It keeps you from falling into despair and lets you trust that life will eventually shift and something new and possible might take the place of what feels heavy now. The other side of this is true as well. Ordinary happiness, pride, or comfort will also change and move on. When you're feeling great and things seem easy, it's tempting to want those moods or successes to last forever. Buddhism teaches that it's better to enjoy those moments, appreciate them for what they are, and openly accept that change will come. If you know good times are also temporary, you can savor them more instead of worrying about losing them. This approach can help you stay more level emotionally, less likely to swing wildly between clinging to the good or fearing the bad. Many people wonder how to practice accepting impermanence, especially when the changes you face are big or painful. It could be anything: the loss of a relationship, moving to a new place, a change in health, or simply getting older. Buddhist teachings offer small, practical ways to help. One is paying mindful attention to your reactions when something shifts unexpectedly. Start to notice, do you tense up? Try to immediately fix the situation or blame yourself for not stopping it. If so, gently bring your awareness back to the fact that change is part of life, and you are not failing for being affected by it. This mindful pause gives you more room to decide how you want to respond, not just react out of panic or frustration. Even for pleasant changes, like getting recognition for your hard work, making new friends, or finding relief from pain, mindful attention helps you avoid slipping into expectation or greed. Enjoy and appreciate what's going well, and remember it is part of a larger pattern. When change comes again, it does not have to feel like a loss or a sign that you did something wrong. You start to see all the moments, good and bad, as chapters in a much bigger story. Some people use specific meditations or reflections focused on impermanence. For example, you could spend 5 or 10 minutes reflecting on small, everyday ways things have changed. How this morning's weather is different from yesterday's. How your breakfast was not the same as last week's. Or how the conversations you had today were different from those in the past. This practice is not meant to make you sad about things passing. It is a way to get more comfortable with changes so they start to feel less threatening and more natural. If you pay attention to relationships, you'll see impermanence there too. Friendships deepen, fade, or change direction over time. Families grow, separate, reunite, and evolve through every stage of life. The way you feel about the people close to you changes from year to year, or even day to day. Accepting this makes you more generous and forgiving with others, because you know that a bad moment or a rough patch is unlikely to last forever. This attitude takes away much of the pressure to fix every relationship on the spot and gives you space to let things unfold. Work and personal projects are full of examples of change as well. You might work hard for a promotion or to build a business, only to find that priorities shift, markets evolve, or new opportunities come up unexpectedly. Rather than seeing these changes as threats or failures, Buddhism suggests bringing curiosity to what is emerging. Maybe a setback makes it possible to discover a skill you did not know you had, or a change in direction introduces you to new people and experiences. The key is not to resist or fight against the tides of change, but to see them as essential parts of learning and living. One of the main fears behind change is the idea that it will leave you worse off, or that you will not be able to handle what comes. Buddhist teachings meet this fear by reminding us that everyone has already survived many changes, some of them painful, some of them joyful. By reflecting on these past experiences, you start to trust in your own resilience and ability to adapt. You realize that new strengths and insights often come from moving through difficult transitions, not from avoiding them. Bit by bit, your faith in yourself grows, making you less reactive and more steady, no matter what life brings. Another way to build comfort with impermanence is to practice simplifying your attachments. If you notice you are obsessing over a result, wanting a relationship to never end, a job to always be secure, or your looks to remain a certain way, pause and acknowledge the underlying fear of change. Take a few breaths and remind yourself, it's normal to want things to stay the same, but it's also safe to let life move forward. With time, you can practice letting go of a little bit of that need for everything to stay stable. Some days you will manage this with ease, other days it will be harder, and that's perfectly normal. People sometimes ask if a focus on impermanence means you should never mourn losses or take joy in achievements. Actually, the opposite is true in Buddhism. Accepting impermanence makes room for healthy grief and real joy because you do not waste energy fighting the truth of what is happening. If you lose something important, you can allow yourself to feel sadness and adjust gently, knowing the pain will change over time. When something goes well, you can celebrate without fear, knowing the moment has value even if it is short-lived. This balanced approach creates more emotional honesty and helps reduce the pressure to always have things one way or the other. An interesting benefit of accepting impermanence is that, over time, it becomes easier to notice new opportunities. When you are tightly holding on to the way things were, your attention is often stuck in regret or worry. When you become more flexible and accepting, you start spotting chances to learn, connect, or try something new, even when life feels uncertain. Buddhist practitioners often express gratitude for the surprises brought by change, even when the initial transition was uncomfortable. This makes daily life feel more spacious and hopeful. Let's also talk about the fear of losing your sense of self. In a world where people are used to identifying with a fixed idea, I am this kind of person, I always like these things, I never do that. The Buddhist view of impermanence invites you to see even your self-image as something that shifts. Over months, years, or after important events, your likes, dislikes, strengths, and vulnerabilities change. Instead of feeling pressure to always be the same you can trust that growing and evolving is natural and often helpful. When you make mistakes or behave differently than usual, instead of blaming yourself, you can ask, what's changing for me? What can I learn here? This attitude makes you much more gentle with your own process. Personal habits and routines experience change too. Sometimes you are able to meditate every morning, stay focused at work, or keep promises to yourself with ease. Other times, old habits creep back, or you feel distracted and lose motivation. Buddhist teachers encourage people to be patient with these fluctuations, to see them as waves, not verdicts on your worth or abilities. With patience, it is much easier to start again after a setback because you know even stubborn habits are not set in stone. If you practice mindfulness or meditation, you might already know how paying attention in the moment reveals the constant movement of everyday life. The taste of food changes from one meal to the next. Your energy shifts with the seasons and the weather. Even the way you talk, laugh, or rest changes as you grow older or learn new things. These little observations support the bigger insight that nothing is frozen. Not your moods, not your problems, not your strengths. Knowing this doesn't always make change easy or comfortable. Some transitions are painful, take time, and involve real loss. What Buddhist wisdom offers is not an escape from discomfort, but a way to live with it gently. By accepting impermanence, you're less likely to fight against the natural flow and more likely to allow support from others and from your own inner resilience. As you make impermanence part of how you see yourself and the world, you may notice a different relationship with hope. The point is not to stop caring about the future, but to carry your hopes lightly, knowing that not everything will go as planned and that's okay. Trusting that things change means that even if today is challenging, tomorrow may bring something new. And if things are good now, it motivates you to be present and grateful. In this way, embracing impermanence actually makes it less frightening. You see not just the losses, but the cycles of renewal, rest, and learning. Friendships shift, work projects end, but new projects, connections, and insights appear. You realize that what makes you valuable or lovable are not your fixed achievements or status, but your willingness to meet change with curiosity and kindness. As you settle into this view, you are less likely to define yourself just by where you are right now. Struggles become normal, effort continues, and you stop demanding that life or your mood follow your old scripts. You trust yourself a bit more to keep learning, trying new approaches, and being gentle when things are tough. The stability you develop does not come from sameness or predictability, but from knowing you have already handled change before and can handle it again, one moment at a time. For Buddhists, making friends with impermanence is a daily practice. It shows up in small details, laughing at plans that changed, forgiving yourself for mistakes, adapting to new routines, or welcoming a new season. It's not about ignoring pain or pretending change is easy. It's about seeing reality clearly and trusting that no moment, feeling, or situation lasts forever. That insight brings a sense of relief and encourages a way of living that is more flexible, gentle, and open to the possibilities that every new day brings. Opening to the reality that everything is constantly shifting brings relief, but it also reveals something many people struggle with for years: the weight of old guilt, self-blame, or grudges you hold against yourself. As you adapt to change and allow yourself a more gentle approach, you start to notice memories of past mistakes, regrets, and words you wish you could take back. For a lot of people, the habit of replaying these moments becomes a quiet background to their lives, sometimes lasting for months or even years. Buddhist teachings are direct about this. They make it clear that true peace inside comes from facing these experiences, your own errors, missed chances, and stumbles, with the intention to forgive and start fresh rather than punish yourself endlessly. This is where the power of both forgiveness and self-compassion becomes obvious, shining a light on another essential path to making peace with yourself. Most people have learned to associate forgiveness with other people, forgiving a friend after a fight or letting go of what someone else did. But in Buddhist tradition, forgiveness starts at home, with yourself. There's a quiet but deep recognition that holding on to old guilt is like carrying extra weight through every day. Even if you know better now or have changed, the residue of self-criticism can stick around, making it hard to relax, to trust yourself, or to believe you deserve kindness. It is common to think this self-blame will keep you from repeating mistakes, but what it really does is block growth and tie you to a version of yourself from the past. If you look at Buddhist stories or even listen to long-time practitioners, you'll find forgiveness is not about forgetting, excusing, or denying what happened. Instead, it's about facing past actions and their consequences honestly. Then, with clear eyes and an open heart, you grant yourself permission to move on. Practicing forgiveness this way means saying, yes, that happened, yes, it had results, and yes, I am still allowed to try, to care, and to move forward. This doesn't erase responsibility or remove the need to repair things when possible. In fact, Buddhism encourages repair and apology wherever possible, but it draws the line when guilt or shame starts poisoning your whole sense of self-worth. In daily practice, bringing forgiveness to yourself can take many forms. Some people repeat compassionate phrases as a reminder like, I forgive myself for not knowing then what I know now, or I am willing to let go of this burden one day at a time. Others write a letter of forgiveness, either reading it privately or, if needed, sharing it with a trusted person or a teacher. Many Buddhist meditations include forgiveness alongside compassion. You sit quietly, recall your regret or mistake, see it clearly, and then offer yourself the intention to let it go, just for now. The key is repetition, that willingness to start anew every day, regardless of how many times an old memory or judgment returns. If you're trying this for the first time, expect some resistance. The mind is used to the drama of guilt. It's familiar, even if it's uncomfortable. You might feel like forgiving yourself will erase the lesson you learned or let you off the hook. But the opposite tends to be true. Real forgiveness from a Buddhist perspective is not about dodging lessons. It's about acknowledging your full humanity, your capacity to grow, and your right to healing. If you get stuck, Buddhist teachers often recommend thinking about how you would treat a loved one in your position. Rarely would you want a friend to suffer forever for a genuine error. When you turn that same mercy inward, your understanding grows. Self-compassion works hand in hand with forgiveness, supporting it at every stage. Compassion in Buddhism is much more than feeling sorry for yourself. It's the active desire to reduce suffering, yours included. While it's common to show patience to friends or even strangers, many are quick to judge themselves harshly for the smallest mistakes, the briefest lapses, or even for just needing help. Buddhist guidance gently encourages viewing your suffering in the same way you would look at a child's struggle, not minimizing it, not ignoring it, but meeting it with patience and warmth. Even saying to yourself, this is hard, but I will not abandon myself, is a radical step for many people. Part of why self-compassion can be awkward at first is that many cultures value toughness or self-improvement over softness or acceptance. But Buddhist teachers are clear. Self-compassion is not an excuse for laziness or avoiding growth. On the contrary, you're far more likely to show up, admit mistakes, and actively change if you know you won't be destroyed internally every time you mess up. Imagine learning a new skill from a coach who encourages honesty, respects your efforts, and helps you recover from missteps. Now try being that coach for yourself. One practice that helps develop both self-forgiveness and compassion is simply noticing how you talk to yourself. When old guilt shows up, pay attention. Is your inner voice harsh, impatient, or even cruel? Are you repeating phrases you've heard from others in the past? There's immense power in pausing to soften your words. Instead of, I can't believe I did that again, try, this is tough, but I'm willing to be kind to myself today. If regret or shame surfaces, you can breathe with it, let yourself feel the real discomfort, and then gently redirect attention to what you can do now, rather than dwelling forever on what cannot be changed. Sometimes the pain from the past comes from real harm done, to others or yourself. Buddhist practice does not ask you to ignore the harm, but provides a step-by-step path for accountability. You start by recognizing what happened, including any pain you caused. You let yourself feel the loss, sadness, or confusion that came with it, not rushing to soothe it, but not intensifying it either. When you're ready, you set the intention to learn, to repair situations when possible, and to bring more understanding to the choices you make going forward. In this model, self-forgiveness is not a declaration that nothing matters, but a living commitment to do better without being chained to the past. An important piece of this work is accepting that everyone, truly everyone, makes mistakes. Sometimes big ones, sometimes repeated ones, sometimes the kind that stay with you for years. Buddhist teachers have always invited honest conversation about this so people can see the common humanity in falling short. When you stop seeing yourself as profoundly worse or more broken than others, you start to make contact with kindness, humility, and steady effort, the same tools that bring real change over weeks, months, and years. Real self-compassion also means recognizing that you deserve care and kindness even when you don't feel you've earned it. Many of us think kindness is given only as a reward for doing well, for fulfilling a standard, for not making waves. Buddhism turns this idea upside down. You deserve compassion just as much on the hard days as on the easy ones, maybe more. In times of pain, failure, or uncertainty, giving yourself a moment of softness, an encouraging word, a patient breath, a willingness to start over can gradually rebuild the trust and hope that old shame may have damaged. Meditation can deepen this habit. In a simple self-compassion meditation, you bring to mind a painful situation, let yourself recognize the real impact it had, and then gently offer words or feelings of comfort. You can repeat something like, "May I be kind to myself in this pain," or "May I give myself permission to heal." You might place a hand over your heart, or just sit with the intention to let a little of the pain move through. This doesn't mean every pain disappears, but over time, these small acts wear away the sharp edges of regret and open up more space for curiosity, hope, and connection. It's worth knowing that Buddhist teachings are realistic about progress. Making peace with your past, or with parts of yourself you wish were different, rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It's more like a collection of small decisions and practices, repeated patiently, that little by little change how you relate to yourself. Sometimes guilt or shame comes back strong, maybe after seeing an old photo, hearing someone's voice, or facing a new situation that brings up old feelings. When that happens, you simply begin again, returning as many times as needed to the choice to forgive and care for yourself. If you're struggling to find compassion or forgiveness inside, you can look for help outside yourself as well. Buddhist communities often encourage finding kalyana mita, or spiritual friends. People who walk with you, listen without judgment, and remind you of your worth when your own mind can't do it. You can also write about your experience, talk it out, or seek professional support if the pain feels overwhelming. Sometimes offering service, making amends, or simply volunteering your time helps restore balance, particularly if you're weighed down by a sense of having hurt someone in the past. Self-forgiveness and compassion do not mean pretending you have no boundaries or that nothing matters. Sometimes recognizing a pattern of harm is the wake-up call you need to change direction, seek help, or build new skills. But you respond to this change as a friend responds to another friend, not as a jury handing out a sentence. When you fall into old habits, you can catch yourself and say, "I see this. I'm not proud, but I also won't give up on myself." Bit by bit, this shifts your expectations away from perfection and closer to the honest, often messy reality of growth. For a lot of people, one of the final blocks to peace inside is a belief that the past cannot be forgiven. Sometimes it's a single incident, something you said, a promise you broke, a mistake with bigger consequences. Sometimes it's a pattern of small slips that piled up over years. Buddhist wisdom holds out hope, even here. It teaches that the present moment, not the past, is where your influence and freedom are. In each moment, you get to decide, will I treat myself with curse and condemnation, or will I bring healing to this old wound by offering compassion instead? Over time, as forgiveness and compassion seep in, you may notice relief in unexpected ways. You might feel lighter when you wake up, less tense in difficult conversations, or more open to trying new things without the old, paralyzing fear of messing up again. Trust in yourself starts to return. Not because your record is clean, but because you've learned you're capable of learning, of changing, and of returning to kindness no matter what mistakes come before. You also find that you become more understanding toward others, less likely to judge harshly, and more able to hold space for people's slip-ups and struggles. Parents, friends, and even leaders who practice forgiveness and self-compassion become safe places for those around them. Instead of adding to someone's shame or self-blame, you know how to reassure, to support honest reflection, and to offer encouragement for taking responsibility and moving forward. You do not cover up problems, but help others see that life can be built back, one step at a time, with patience. The Buddhist path, in this sense, is honest enough to hold all of your past, including the hard and painful parts, without making any of it a permanent verdict on who you are. Nothing you did or felt is the sum total of your being. You can let regret and shame guide you for a little while if needed, but eventually the path is meant to move toward release, acceptance, and freedom. From here, you can set new intentions, repair relationships, or simply treat yourself as a worthy, learning human being. Choosing forgiveness and self-compassion again and again builds a deep kind of courage, the ability to meet both wounds and hopes with a full heart. In Buddhist practice, these qualities are not luxuries or afterthoughts, they are essentials. Each time you remember to pause, soften your words to yourself, or choose to begin again, you are showing up for yourself with the same care you would offer anyone you love. Gradually, that care becomes the ground for everything more positive you want to build. New habits, stronger connections, and the peaceful sleep that comes when you know you are no longer an enemy to yourself. Even if it takes many tries or the old inner critic never disappears completely, you are always free to choose, each day, to meet yourself with a little more patience and openness. Forgiveness and compassion are not quick fixes, but they are the steady light that helps bring real peace within, no matter what your past story might hold. As you slowly build a foundation of compassion, forgiveness, and a fresh relationship with your mistakes and imperfections, a question eventually comes up. How do you actually weave all of these Buddhist teachings into regular, everyday life? It's one thing to experience relief or insight during a quiet meditation, or to feel a spark of self-kindness while watching a video or reading a book. Yet real transformation, the kind that shapes your days and the way you treat yourself and others, comes from making all of this a practice that isn't just for special moments or when you're struggling. Instead, it becomes something that supports you on an ordinary Tuesday morning as much as during a difficult night. Buddhist wisdom is always meant to be lived, brought into the noise of your kitchen, the tension of a work meeting, or the long line at the grocery store. You don't need to be a monk or wear special robes to do this. Instead, what matters is small, steady habits that remind you of your intention to meet life with more gentleness, awareness, and acceptance. Integrating these teachings into day-to-day life is less about big declarations and more about gentle, repeated choices that, over time, reshape your default reactions in all sorts of situations. A realistic way to bring Buddhist principles into your routine is to use short pauses throughout the day. Instead of waiting for a perfect session of meditation or a block of free time, pay attention for a moment anytime you wash your hands, climb stairs, eat a meal, or even tie your shoes. These little routine actions can become reminders to check in. How am I breathing? What is my mind focused on? Am I tensing up? Or can I soften? This sort of mindfulness doesn't need to be formal. It's about sprinkling moments of awareness, however brief, into the scattered spaces of your daily experience. Another strong support for bringing these teachings off the cushion and into real life is to work with intentions, which simply means starting the day or even a new task with a simple inner reminder. Before you answer an email, cook a meal, or start a project, pause for a breath and think, "Let me do this kindly," or "May I be present for this next part of my day." These short intentions are easy to carry with you wherever you go. They come in handy especially in inevitable moments of stress, when you notice irritation or anxiety starting to build. The act of recalling your intention can interrupt old automatic patterns of self-blame or harshness. If your to-do list or work schedule feels especially packed, Buddhist practice encourages using transitions as anchors. Every time you move from one place to another, a meeting ends and you walk to your desk, you finish lunch and wash your plate, you're about to turn off your computer at the end of the day, use these shifts as opportunities to return to your breath or to offer yourself a gentle thought like, "I am still learning," or "This moment matters too." Over days and weeks, these mini pauses add up, gradually shifting you from living on autopilot toward living with more attention and acceptance. Physical reminders can make a surprising difference too. Some people leave a stone, string, or small charm in their pocket, or place a note by the bathroom mirror or computer screen with a word or phrase that reminds them of a quality they want to embody. Words like patience, kindness, or let go. When you feel tension rising or the urge to criticize yourself, touching the object or reading the note can bring you back to your intention. If you spend time with others, these teachings can shape your relationships as well. Practicing mindful listening is a big part of bringing Buddhism into daily interactions. This means actually slowing down to hear what someone is saying, noticing your impulse to interrupt or judge, and gently guiding your attention back to their words. If a conversation starts to get heated, you might pause, breathe, and silently repeat an intention like, "May we both feel heard." When you make mistakes or feel misunderstood, these simple practices help you forgive yourself faster and repair connections rather than let small wounds fester. It's also important to remember that Buddhist practice isn't about being calm, perfect, or peaceful all of the time. Everyone will have days that are messy, rushed, or exhausting. The goal is not to avoid challenge or discomfort, but to bring curiosity and acceptance to whatever happens. On tough days, Buddhism encourages a kind of gentle honesty. Today is hard. I will offer myself extra patience. Instead of slipping into self-criticism or blame, regular gratitude helps reinforce these habits. Set aside a minute at the end of each day to recall 3 small things you appreciated. A friendly smile, a good meal, a moment of rest, or just a simple breath. Gratitude is not about demanding that you feel good all the time. Rather, it balances the mind by noticing what's already okay, especially when you're tempted to dwell on what's missing or what went wrong. Over time, this practice supports emotional steadiness and helps build resilience for rough days. Integrating Buddhist wisdom also means making room for human mistakes. You will lose your patience, miss a mindful moment, or completely forget your intention sometimes. Buddhist teachings are clear about this. The goal is to notice when this happens and start again, each time without shame. This begin again spirit, practiced many times across weeks and months, is what really makes change possible. It allows you to meet yourself as a work in progress, not a finished product, and to take joy in each instance of gentle attention. If you feel comfortable, you can share your learning or practice with others. This doesn't mean preaching or converting, but simply letting close friends or family know you're trying to bring more awareness or kindness into your life. Sometimes mutual support makes it easier to keep going, especially when people around you understand and respect your goals. You might discover that others also crave this type of presence and acceptance and are grateful for your example or encouragement. For some, keeping a short reflection journal is helpful. At the end of the day, jot down a few notes. When was I able to be kind today? Where did I get swept up in criticism, control, or old habits? Did I pause, forgive, or try again when things went sideways? This quiet review is not about looking for failure or perfection, but about building gentle awareness of your habits so you can notice gradual movement over time. When things feel overwhelming or you're struggling to maintain these habits, Buddhist teachings suggest simplifying wherever possible. That might mean focusing on just one practice for a while, maybe just mindful breathing or a single phrase of loving kindness each morning. If you find formal meditation challenging, use mindful walks, listening to music with full attention, or even a simple cup of tea as a practice. The main thing is to keep returning, as best you can, to your intention to treat yourself and others with respect and care, no matter what is going on. For moments of real challenge, when grief, anger, fear, or self-doubt are strong, Buddhism offers the antidote of self-compassion and gentle patience. Instead of rushing to fix things, pause and breathe. Remind yourself that you are not alone, that this struggle is shared by people everywhere. If guilt or regret shows up, recall the forgiveness practices. Speak a kind phrase inwardly. Maybe, "I forgive myself for being human. May I begin again?" If you slip into old habits of seeking control or resisting change, remember to gently let go. Trust in the flow of things and reassure yourself that you can respond again in the next moment. Bringing these teachings into daily life transforms not only your relationship with yourself, but also how you show up for others and for challenges at work, with family, or in uncertain times. The habit of pausing before reacting stops arguments from escalating. The choice to notice what's going well, even when you feel defeated, helps you gain perspective and energy for what comes next. Reaching for compassion toward yourself and those around you helps you build stronger, more resilient connections. You will probably find that over time, these small habits add up. Maybe you sleep more easily at night or stop replaying conversations in your head with as much anxiety. You might notice that setbacks, which used to knock you off balance for days, now pass more quickly, replaced by acceptance or new ideas. People close to you may even comment that you seem a bit more open, more patient, or quicker to forgive, even when things are difficult. When integrating Buddhist wisdom, one of the biggest gifts is that you learn to trust the process rather than rush for outcomes. You learn that every attempt to show up for yourself with patience and acceptance is valuable, even when you forget or fail along the way. The shift is slow and steady, not about changing your circumstances overnight, but about shaping how you relate to everything that happens. You bring the calm, forgiving habits from meditation or reflection right into your job, parenting, friendships, and even your time alone. You don't have to wait for a crisis or a breakthrough to practice. Ordinary moments count more than any dramatic turning point. With time, you see that making peace with yourself isn't just a private journey. It spills outward, affecting how you listen to complaints or disagreements at work, how you treat strangers you encounter, and even how you show up for people you love when they are struggling. It's in the way you apologize, the way you receive feedback, the way you let your own guard down. If you ever worry that you're not making progress quickly enough, or that you're doing the practice wrong, come back to the very basics: awareness, intention, kindness, and the willingness to start again each day. This is the core of integrating any teaching, Buddhist or otherwise. When life gets messy or you slip into old patterns, you'll have a foundation to return to, a set of habits that gently clear the way for acceptance, relaxation, and a deeper kind of joy. Integrating Buddhist wisdom into daily life is not about becoming some ideal model of calm or patient living. It's about remembering that you have choices, moment by moment, and that each small act of kindness or awareness counts. You turn ordinary routines into opportunities for presence, turn setbacks into places for forgiveness, and turn each new day into a fresh chance to practice peace with yourself and the world around you. In this way, Buddhist teachings stop being distant or abstract ideas and start to become the gentle foundation of a more open, compassionate life, no matter how the outside world changes or what challenges appear along the way.